Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to try to articulate why it is that I choose to use a DSLR to digitize my film photos and then use a raw photo workflow to bring the most out of the film images that I take. So I get a lot of questions about my digitizing workflow with film, and a lot of people are curious about why I choose to digitize my film using a negative copying rig and my Pentax K3 DSLR. And the reason is because digitizing film that way allows me to work with the images as raw files. So it gives me a whole lot of control over the images that I wouldn't have if I just worked with them as JPEGs. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. So I'm taking the JPEG, I shoot RAW plus JPEG so I can organize photos on my computer easily. Here's the JPEG that came out of my camera. I'm going to invert it with Control I, and now you can see that that's what it looks like. It's kind of a flattish negative, but there's areas of contrast in it. It just doesn't have a whole lot in the highlight range. I'm going to make this black and white pretty quickly and simply. There we go. That takes care of the color cast. It turned blue because the light source I used to digitize these has a slight, it's a full spectrum light bulb, but it has a slight warmth to it. So this is the JPEG, and there is some things I can do with this. I can make it very contrasty, right? I can sharpen it and things like that, but it's going to be hard for me to pull out some of this cloud detail in here. And this is a fine image. There's nothing wrong with this image. I would be happy with this as a result from a scan for sure. Let's take a look at what happens if I edit this in RAW. So here's that same image in RAW. And you can see it's the negative because I just took a photo of the negative. The first thing I'm going to do is make it a positive. Go into the Curves tab, and now by adjusting the curves, it's a positive. There are a couple of different things here that I can do to take out this blue cast, and you can probably see right away that the blue cast here is not as drastic as it was with the JPEG, and that's because this is a RAW file. So the first thing I can do is I can just drop the saturation to negative 100. That does it. But I want to illustrate a point here. When you work with negatives and RAW, everything suddenly becomes opposite. Normally, I'd correct the color temperature on a blue image by dragging it over to the yellow side. But because this is really a negative that we've adjusted the curves on, every slider is going to work in reverse. So to get rid of the blue cast, I need to drag the slider over towards the blue side. That looks pretty good. That wasn't that far off. You can still drop the saturation. Dropping the saturation is the easiest way to come up with a black and white image. So let's mess around with these four right here. Highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks are the sliders that are going to give you the most result and help you pull the most out of your images. So if we bring up all the highlights, instantly you're going to notice this really jacks up the blacks and the positive because the slider is working in reverse. So the question is, do you want to have really deep shadows or bring in lots of shadow detail? So I don't need quite that much shadow detail, but I want some because I can always add more shadows in Photoshop when it's being treated as a JPEG, right? Do I want highlight detail? Do I want to make it flat or contrasty? So I kind of like this a little bit better. Whites. So this is where you have the most dramatic effect, right? You can see here, if you make your whites really white in positive, they become really black, okay? So I want to actually bring this down this way a little bit. Let's see, maybe I need to bring this up higher a little bit, yeah. Now, let's see what I can correct with the black slider here. There we go. That looks pretty good. That's getting to where I want it to be. And just for fun, let's add some sharpness because your JPEGs get a little bit of sharpness that the RAW images don't. I like to put it at no more than 15. 15 is pretty aggressive because we can always add sharpening in a minute in post again. So now let's open this image. We're going to compare the two and see which one looks better. So this is the one that we edited as a RAW file. This is the JPEG. Now, to my eyes, I actually like the RAW file one a little bit better. You can see there's a better tone here in the supports than there is in the JPEG. This looks fairly white and plasticky. RAW file also has better detail here in the shadow areas. There's better clarity over here in the Ferris wheel, and to my eyes, at least on my monitor, the cloud detail in the sky up here over Santa Monica is better. It's more contrasty, I should say, in the photo that was edited as a RAW than in this photo here, which was edited as the JPEG. The advantages to the JPEG edited photo is you get a little bit brighter of an image over here. The Ferris wheel carts, for instance, look a little bit brighter. So at any rate, it's the result here that I got from editing as RAW is a lot of personal preference. So the first point I'd like to make is that editing this in RAW gives you a lot more control to achieve an image that matches your personal preference for your image aesthetic. Okay, so let's close both of these because we don't need them anymore. I'm going to show you the next reason why I do all of my post work for film in RAW. I'm going to grab a bunch of photos here off this roll of film. This is a roll that I took. It was Eastman Kodak XX5222. Developed it in D76 at a concentration of 1+1 for 11 minutes and exposed it as 250 ISO film. So let's see. That's a pretty good span of images with lots of different lighting and things like that. And we have the one that we edited right here. So we've opened them all up in the RAW editor. Now you could do this with your entire roll of film, all 36 images, right? So let's go over here to the one that we've already done. Select all up here on the left and synchronize. Now every single negative on that roll of film is going to have the same color profile as the master, as the key image that we edited. Now we can go into individuals like, this is really kind of dark for the image I want to create, so that's not the right thing to do. There we go. That looks a little bit better. That's tough. That's a tough image. This is going to be a hard image to recover any meaningful shadow detail out of, but scanning this, we could not have even gotten this much shadow detail. So different photo. This is the one we used as our key image. I should say you're going to end up with negatives that can be adjusted to a relatively consistent level because the developing at least will have been the same for the whole roll, right? So if you synchronize your entire roll, then that gives you the ability to make smaller tweaks on your photos instead of trying to go through and having to do the same thing over and over again. So let's talk about how much time this has taken us. To scan 6 negatives takes, let's call it 5 to 7 minutes. To digitize a roll of film, 36 frames, takes less than 5 minutes if you're going slowly and being careful about it. If you don't care about the negatives, you can do it with the roll of film in 36 seconds if you really want to. It's a pretty quick process. And if you want to see how I digitize my film, I have an old video that shows an earlier version of how I do it, but the general concept is the same. So then once you've made your key image and synchronized everything, you just select everything again and open up your images. And now once you have all your images open, it's just a matter of going through and cleaning up little bits of dust that were on there. You can see a couple of these negatives were a little bit thin, so you can see chemical drips on some of the negatives. If your sensor has a piece of dust in it, like let's look over here. There's generally been a piece of sensor dust over on the left corner here. There it is. On my images, you'll know where it is on every single image. You can just go in and clone it out every single time, and if you watch it, it'll drive you as nuts as it does me. The worst part is I've cleaned my sensor half dozen times. It doesn't go away. So why is it that I choose to digitize film with my DSLR and an enlarger lens and then edit it in RAW? The simple reason is that I can recover more shadow detail and recover more highlight detail from the negative than I can with a scanned copy of it. It's basically, using RAW for this gives me as much flexibility in the Photoshop program or whatever RAW editor you choose to use as I would have spending hours and hours and hours trying to figure out the best way to contrast and then dodge and burn a a print in the darkroom. So it's really giving me a darkroom level of image control on my computer in a way that isn't matched by any scanner or JPEG file that you can get your hands on. And you don't even have to have a high-end DSLR for this. If you had something like a Pentax K3 II that has pixel shift and slide film, the results would be absolutely fantastic. But if you have a Canon 10D or a Nikon D40 or anything, even if it's giving you a 6 megapixel image, as long as it can give you a raw file with a reasonable amount of data in it, which even a 5 or 7 year old DSLR can do, you're going to be able to pull more out of that raw file from that negative than you would any scanned JPEG. So you don't even need a high-end DSLR to do this. I have a Pentax K10D that can do smaller images, but pull as much detail out of the negative as my K3 can. So the cost of entry on this is pretty affordable. So that's it. That's my post workflow when I digitize film. I'm pretty happy with the results that I get, and I can do pretty consistent results across multiple rolls of film when I digitize this way. So let me know if you have any questions about this. If you want to know what type of equipment I use, I'm more than happy to discuss that and point you in the direction of how you can start up doing this for a pretty affordable price tag, certainly much less than a high-end scanner would cost you.